Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. Leonardo Fornaroli crowned as the most underwhelming Formula 3 champion in history, and Gabriel Bortoleto forgetting that Formula 2 is not in fact iRacing, are only two of many good feeder series storylines playing out over the weekend, and as always I will try to cover most of them, including finally a return to North America with a look towards IndyCar. But of course, as has become tradition, we begin with a quick kart scouting report. In the kart racing world, we had two important events taking place this weekend. We begin with the Rotax Euro Trophy, the last of 4 rounds of this particular European Cup Championship, if that makes sense. And in the mini category, we had Strawberry Racing dominating the weekend, which meant Albi friend managed to claim yet another title this year. He is of course one of the front runners over in the British Karting Championship, and here he showed that he can do it on the European stage as well, as he has been doing all year long, to be honest, and he mostly dominated the weekend. Again, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, rather impressive in the minis in particular to be able to break away from the pack this consistently. His teammate Tom Reed and Nikita Lyubimov did complete the podium and had very good performances throughout the weekend, but it was in fact countryman Ollie Spencer claiming P2 in the championship ahead of one of my personal favorites, and I don't know, Zdeněk Babicek. Czech people, please don't hate me, just tell me how to pronounce his first name in the comments, but either way, the kid is very quick and one of my, fun underdogs to watch, never part of any of the big teams and yet always on the sharp end, even if it didn't quite work out this particular weekend. In the juniors, we had a guest star actually dominating the weekend, Scott Marsh, who's normally more busy on the more expensive European Championship, in the OKJ category. And here he showed that he doesn't just have more budget, but also, just a lot of pace in his pocket, because he ended up blitzing the final from P7. He had to start quite a bit down because of a penalty in the superheat. So a very impressive run there, and really stole the show a little from championship winner Kacper. I do have to say, Nissen is very consistent, but in my opinion, never really stood out as anyone super duper dominant or anything, so I can't get too excited about this particular title. I do want to highlight Thijs van Wijk as well, a Dutch competitor who just about missed out on the title. His title hopes ended in the final when he got dumped pretty early on. But I do have to say, overall, over the course of the year, I'd argue he was probably the better driver, at least for my money. I don't know how biased I am here. And then last but not least, we do need to mention Jacob Ashcroft. Yes, only in P3, he lost too many crucial points in Franciacorta, but nonetheless, clearly one of the stars of the category, and as a rookie as well. The seniors did also compete, but first of all, I didn't have time to watch those yet, and it's also not hugely relevant for us feeder series fans, as the championship leaders are a little on the older side. So instead, we want to focus on the FIA European Championship in the KZ2 category, the big shifter karts. Here it was really Maksim Orlov who was the man of the weekend, dominating for Modena Parolin to claim P3 in the championship. As a 16-year-old Russian kid, I don't really know if single-seaters are in his future. I don't know if it's, the political situation maybe holding him back a little, or if there wasn't ever the funds in the first place or anything. But either way, I do hope we can maybe see him in a single-seater at some point in the future. This looks a lot less likely for 17-year-old champion Mateusz Brazil. That name is also, French is not my favorite language to pronounce. Either way, the ace driver for Saudi Kart this year did take a close P2 on track to become European champion. So very impressive drive, but unfortunately I don't think he'll become relevant for the Formula fans out there. So, just keep that in mind. Instead, we did have a lot of other young drivers competing in this particular championship. A lot of them not doing too well, as often happens. This is a very tough field to compete in as a young guy in your rookie year, and a lot of them only stay around for like 1 year. But one man did stand out massively, and that's another Dutchman, Kacper Schormans, where I do have to say, 15-year-old Dutchie, I've seen him race a couple of years, but he never really stood out too much so far, at least not to this extent. But here he was hugely impressive, taking a podium, beating vastly experienced Daniel Vasile on track to take that podium. So hats off there, brilliant drive, and a guy to, hopefully we have to keep him in mind. Much like with the senior category in Rotax, I don't think covering the KZ or even the KZ2 Masters is particularly relevant for us, so instead I want to move on. But please let me know down in the comments what you make of this sort of, quick fire card scouting update to familiarize you with a couple of relevant names. Anyway, on to the big show in F3. The Formula 3 Championship was all set up for an epic title showdown, and boy did it deliver. Yes, Christian Mansell and Dino Beganovic dropped out of the title battle after the sprint race. Olli Goethe did get himself an F2 seat for the weekend, so he dropped out of the title fight before the weekend even began. But of course, none of these drivers were actually like true championship favorites. They just had a mathematical chance. So instead, we were left with an epic showdown on Sunday with Fornaroli and Gabriel Bortoleto fighting it out on track for the title. If you somehow haven't seen this race, please do yourself a favor, go back and watch it. It is absolutely worth your time. Because yeah, it was the title fight we had hoped for, with again the pair actually not just fighting for the championship but going head to head on track. Yes, Mini was on the back foot, he had a bit of a points gap to overcome, and he actually did everything he could by beating Fornaroli on track, taking P2 from him, and then Leonardo Fornaroli did the unthinkable to go past Christian Mansell in the last corner of the last lap to take back P3 and thus just about score enough points to take the title despite Mini finishing ahead of him on track. Not going to lie, obviously I'm a little bit of a Mini fan, and I was watching that race live and I got very excited, and I was already sort of celebrating Mini while they were going down the back straight, only for Fornaroli to pull off that move. So yeah, hats off, what a brilliant piece of driving. He will be remembered as the guy to win the title without ever winning a race, and we'll get to what that means in a second. But you can't take anything away from him in this particular drive. At least he did everything he could to secure the title. Unfortunately, as perfect of an end to the season this was on track, it continued to get a bit shit because post-race Mini got disqualified anyway for tyre pressure shenanigans. So essentially this entire epic battle and showdown and send for P3 and everything didn't matter at all in the end. And of course that is a little bit of a mess and has happened, one too many times this year in the feeder series for my own liking. But I suppose it is what it is. Anyway, let's talk about what all of this now means for Fornaroli in particular. Is he the most underwhelming Formula 3 champion to date? I would argue yes. It is a little reminiscent of last year, which is one caveat to keep in mind, because I said similar things about Bortoleto. Of course, he won some races, but he also largely won the title based on magnificent consistency. And of course, it turned out he's not just consistent, but he's also absolutely rapid and now one of the most impressive drivers in Formula 2, period. So I was rather wrong about Bortoleto last year. The same could be said here for Fornaroli. Maybe he is a lot better than we all think right now. But obviously the entire story surrounding this is a little different as well. Unlike Bortoleto, he isn't a rookie. Yes, he's not going up against as many rookies either, but nonetheless, I think consistency from a rookie is like super impressive. If you're a second year, I want to see some of that raw pace as well, which was the one thing lacking here. Even in the race, he ended up winning the title obviously with an epic move, as we just talked about. He still made a crucial mistake, costing himself a couple of positions, making the entire thing a lot more, close than it should have been. And his teammate actually dominated the race, Sami Megatunov getting another win for himself. So even while he's securing the title, he does get, a little bit dominated by his own garage. So it's just not particularly impressive. In some ways, it does feel like Mini and Beganovic in particular lost the title more so than Fornaroli won it, if that makes sense. Prema as a whole, obviously not particularly consistent. across all series this year. And these two in particular were just stuck outside the top 10 a couple too many races, if that makes sense. In my opinion, the key takeaway from this season is really Luke Browning, probably the most well-rounded driver on the grid. He was often outgunned by the two Italian teams and still managed to put himself in the conversation weekend after weekend. Yes, he made one big mistake in the last feature race of the year, but come on, can you really blame him? He had nothing to lose at this stage, really. I think overall, over the course of the season, he was basically as flawless as they come in Formula 3. On the other hand, the guy with the most potential is quite clearly Arvid Lindblad. Yes, very hit or miss this weekend again, a little miss, but he is not just a rookie, but of course it's his second year in car racing. Being a little hit or miss is totally okay, and I do expect him to be a major front runner next season if he doesn't just get promoted to F2 outright, which, knowing Red Bull, is the more likely option anyway. Last but not least, I want to highlight how well MP Motorsports did yet again. They tend to do this at Monza anyway, and we once again had Alex Dunn and Tim Tremnitz sort of just cement themselves as rapid drivers all around. Tim Tremnitz finally got his maiden victory in the sprint race, and crucially, Kacper Stuke was still nowhere to be seen. What a year to forget from this guy, and I do just have to say, this does give a lot of credit to the theory, which especially some Polish fans were not really ready to listen to last year. But that car was a little rapid, and maybe not just his own driving winning that title, but getting very lucky in other regards to dominate the second half of Italian F4 the way he did. Of course, I hope he can bounce back. I do like the guy, but I wouldn't really hold my breath for it, if that makes sense. And then last but not least, we do have the news that Leonardo Fornaroli has actually secured an F2 seat for next season already. He is announced as a driver for Invicta, which, looking at Bortoleto and Schormans this year, should actually give him a very good chance to show if we're all wrong about him, much like Bortoleto did in some ways. So I am looking forward to that. Of course, there is a full season F3 review coming at some point in the year, but I don't know when. You know how it is, so we'll just have to move on to F2 for the time being. In F2, as I already said in the intro, for me the story of the weekend was quite clearly Gabriel Bortoleto dominating the feature race by going last to first like he's on iRacing playing against AI. Yes, he was aided by a very fortunate safety car timing. I mean, you do have to have some sort of luck to pull this off, but it was by no stretch of the imagination like a huge bonus for him, and he still had to get a lot of moves done and made it a point to not just win, but to drive off and win by over 10 seconds, which in F2, of course, is not exactly an easy thing to do. And it comes at like the perfect timing as well for him, putting himself in the shop window just as there are, the rumored links to Sauber, Audi, Kick, whatever you want to call it, the green team. And yeah, as I said in the F3 segment, I couldn't be any happier how wrong I was about that kid going into the year. Unlike Paul Aron, who still, I think that high tech is a little faster than some of its competitors, as you can see with Amaury Cordeel. Unlike him, I think Bortoleto actually has that edge that could allow him to take the title fight to Isaac Hadjar if Hadjar's bad luck, which he had again here to an extent, continues into the next couple weekends. On a different story, our favorite time of the year, Prema Watch, Bearman and Kimi Antonelli going wheel to wheel big time in the feature race. The battle did get denied in the sprint because Kimi got taken out on lap 1 while Bearman went on to actually dominate the thing. But in the feature, the pair could battle. Kimi was the one coming out on top for all of those still doubting him, but talking good about Bearman. I didn't really know how you can make these mental gymnastics, but nonetheless, I think both of them got to show why they are in the positions they're in terms of their F1 future, because both of them can race, even if Prema is failing them a little bit this year. I would love for these battles to continue going into next season, but of course with Bearman and a Haas, I don't really see it happening all too often, but oh well, that's F1 for you. Instead, I think another driver that's not talked about enough is Richard Verschoor, Mr. Consistent in the Formula 2 in sort of a meh kind of team, just Trident in F2, obviously not comparable to Trident in F3 by any stretch of the imagination. And he is utterly destroying Roman Stanek, who in his own right is a pretty solid young racing driver. Like, he's no Villa-Gomez or anything that's there for dubious reasons. He can actually drive pretty well himself. And honestly, for sure, in my opinion, it's so sad that F1 teams do not care about drivers once they go beyond their like second year in F2, because he is one of those that should be on the list for, do you maybe need a consistent pair of hands, which, you know, you could gamble on to at least do a very good job. He'd be one of my picks, you know. I think the guy is a great racing driver and I want to see him in a fully professional gig soon rather than staying around in F2. But of course, we all need those brilliant benchmark drivers as well. So either way, I am happy to have him on any grid, really. We do have a couple of newcomers this weekend as well. Olli Goethe, already teased it. He did about as well as you'd expect. You know, he was there. He wasn't blowing anyone away with his pace, but he was doing laps and he was keeping it reasonably clean. So that was okay. On the other hand, we did also have Niels Coulen replacing Taylor Barnett in the AIX machine. And here, I just have to say, it's so sad to see, because Coulen is such a fraud, and we've gone the entire year without any of these like super backmarkers. Yes, there's Cordil, yes, there is Villa-Gomez, but Cordil aided by the high tech and Villa-Gomez actually just being half decent himself. Like, there wasn't any big backmarkers this year at all. And Niels Coulen is that and much worse. Like, he should not be in this car if it was at all anywhere near merit based. Yes, of course, AIX probably, you know, helped Barnett a little and they deserve their payout now, so it's okay, but I really hope he doesn't stay around for a full season next year. I hope someone more competent can find the budget required, because this is no fun to watch. The other side of the AIX garage, though, was incredibly fun to watch, because Joshua Dirksen, once again, first of all, further indicates that something is wrong with that car, because he was an absolute rocket ship in a straight line in particular. He could have had a double podium, just about didn't manage the one on the feature, but nonetheless, fantastic driving on his part. We knew that probably going into the season, he's a little better than his CV suggests. You know, he was only ever driving for bad teams. But I do want to point out, I'm not buying it anyway. Like, yes, he's not a bad driver. I didn't think so going into the season, and he's even better than I thought he was going to be. But make no mistakes, I don't think he'd be replicating this in another car. Or at least I am very doubtful he would, with no inside knowledge. But I've got a feeling, you know. Then we have the big show, F1 at Monza. And of course, yeah, we don't need to talk about the race in detail. Leclerc winning in front of the Ferrari home crowd will never be a bad sight, so I am happy there. Ferrari winning by actually getting the strategy right is rare in and of itself, doing a one-stopper against a bunch of two-stoppers. But for me, the talking point here is really just what's going on with McLaren and why are they insisting on not giving Norris a chance in this championship. We all know the drivers is obviously going to be a little bit of a reach, right? But with how Verstappen looked this weekend, for example, Red Bull was firmly outgunned by Ferrari, Mercedes and McLaren. The best Verstappen should have gotten on pace, would have been like a P7, and then, okay, he got some help from Russell. But essentially, the Red Bull should have lost big points this weekend, and they sort of did. But McLaren allowing Piastri and Norris to fight it out on lap 1 and everything was one of the factors, at least, giving Leclerc that chance to take the win from Norris. I don't know what's the point here. And letting Norris sit in P3 behind Piastri. Yes, Piastri was the quicker driver this weekend, I guess, or at least close enough to... He got up position on merit. I don't blame Oscar at all. He's doing what racing drivers are supposed to be doing. But I don't think the team should be allowing it. At least, please don't battle hard on lap 1. Like, if you get away off the grid in P1, 2 and Norris for once actually gets off the line, well, please don't throw it away 2 corners later. There should be some sort of, maybe not hard team orders, but like a team plan. At least work together for some laps, you know. I don't really know. If McLaren needs to make a choice really quickly ahead of the next couple of races if they want Norris in this title fight or not. And if they don't, then honestly they should just come out and say Max can have it. Like, just give him the trophy if you're not actually going to try. Anyway, of course, this is a little overreacting, but it was really upsetting to watch for someone who's, dreaming about a title fight, which Max can then win and prove everyone why he's still the best guy on the grid. This is my personal favorite fantasy here. Anyway, the other piece of news we need to talk about from this F1 weekend was obviously Franco Colapinto getting his debut out of the way. It was about as quiet as we had hoped for, really, because yeah, we know his job is just to keep the car out of the wall and do a decent job, and a decent job he did, actually taking P12 on debut in a Williams while Albon was just about in the top 10. Very good result for my money, and yeah, did about what I expected him to do. Zero complaints there. Some people did have complaints though, not about Colapinto, but about James Vowles and his comments before the weekend, where he said something along the lines of calling Mick Schumacher and Franco Colapinto nothing special. And of course he was talking about why he chose Colapinto over Schumacher and what the thought process is there. And essentially he compared them in that regard. And some people were taking this as he insulted Colapinto and I don't know, and his entire family tree or something. I don't know why. There's nothing in there to suggest this. I just want to make it very clear, even if maybe FIA Series fans, you know this anyway. But being called nothing special compared to the F1 grid is not really an insult, especially for a guy like Colapinto. He's not like the next Bearman Kimi, like a big protege. He is a very good driver, never really getting any of the big titles or anything. There is no track record of him being talked about as the next big thing or anything. I don't know why essentially calling him an average F1 driver while in his first F2 season, if you were to take it this way around, is anywhere near an insult. And if you get upset about this, I hope you're not the same kind of people then going on to say, oh yeah, I'm so bored by all of this PR speech, because this is actually just real. This is setting realistic expectations for your young junior driver. And by the way, no matter what he says in public, I'm sure there are private conversations. I'm sure Colapinto knows what's expected of him, no matter what Vowles said publicly. Anyway, I just wanted to get this out there. Let me know if I'm entirely out of line there and if you think it's the most outrageous comment ever, but in my book, this was really a weird thing to get upset about. Time to go on to America. Over in the US, or well, more precisely in Canada, we did have the penultimate rounds of both the Formula Regional Americas Championship and F4 USA, but unfortunately, as far as I can tell, and please correct me if I'm just stupid, but I don't think there was a broadcast, or at least I couldn't find it. So we're not going to talk about the races in detail because, well, how would I? I just want to highlight that Patrick Woods-Toth did secure the Formula Regional Americas title with 1 round to spare on home soil, so congratulations there. Yes, there's a caveat to the title because his main competition, both Ryan Sheehan and Titus Sherlock, missed crucial rounds. In Sheehan's case, he's still not competing in the championship anymore for budget reasons, and Sherlock obviously missed 1 key round in the middle of the championship. But nonetheless, Patrick Woods-Toth is still a very deserved champion, and I guess most likely he would have won it anyway, even with the other two competing at every round. At least this is my best guess. Either way, all 3 of those drivers are quite competent, quite a step above the rest of the grid, and I am looking forward to see where they end up. Over in IndyNXT, we had actually a pretty similar story because Louis Foster managed to secure the title with 1 round to go on the Milwaukee Mile, winning lights to flag in dominant fashion. And honestly, considering how the season started with Nolan Siegel versus Jacob Abel for the first couple of races, trading back and forth, it looked like those two were the firm championship contenders. It is really mental that Foster has now gone on to dominate the title the way he did. Yes, obviously Siegel pulled out of the series because he bought himself an IndyCar seat, but Foster managed to secure top 2 in the last 10 races in a row, and he won 7 of those. So this is utter domination on this particular level, and I really hope to see him get the promotion next season that he desperately deserves. Jacob Abel was still the one to stand up to him, and he proved it here, not just in the championship, but on track he's standing up to him. He got dumped early on in the race and still recovered to take P2 on the road, despite overtaking being rather tricky for the most part. So, clearly showing, yes, these two are the 2 top dogs in the series. No more discussion, at least on the oval side of things. Overall, We also have Kaya Colette in there firmly. I do think on the road courses he might by now be one of the best drivers. I think he is a big favorite going into next season if he elects to stay, in particular obviously on road and street courses. But he has shown here that he is still struggling a little bit to, you know, with the ovals, getting the hang of that particular discipline of racing. He was going backwards in the race, but nonetheless he has secured P3 in the championship and Rookie of the Year. So hugely outstanding performance there this season, and really shows that he should not have had to leave the European ladder, if that makes sense. I think he would have done a similar job in Formula 2. I was very surprised while looking at the championship standings to still find Callum Hedge in P4 despite going missing for quite a couple rounds in a row now. But I do think, as much as I love Callum Hedge, this doesn't show that he is like a great driver. I think more so this shows just how struggling the lower half of the grid really is. And by lower half, I mean it's anything below Foster, Abel and Colette, because none of these guys string together any sort of consistent results. And I think like the best example you can even give there is Jamie Chadwick, who we've obviously talked about extensively. She got podium this year, she got her maiden win this year, and in between those couple really good performances and another couple good ones early on in the year, she has disappeared entirely and has had many races struggling to crack the top 10. And I think in this championship, unfortunately, it's like the opposite. It's not F3 where it's, oh, okay, there's like 20 really good drivers, so, you know, we can't all be in the top 10. I think here it's more like people actively trying not to be in the top 10, if you know what I mean. So definitely shows there is some problems with quality on that grid beyond the top very few, which don't kid yourselves, the top couple drivers in this are really competitive and absolutely deserve a shot in the big show. Talking about the big show, finally back to talking about IndyCar, a doubleheader at Milwaukee. And first of all, I have to say the track was great. I do love oval races on IndyCar. I don't know if it's because I don't watch enough NASCAR. Like, I'm not even picky, even when the fans say, oh, the race was boring for me. I'm always excited to watch these things go around an oval. I don't know, I just am like this. In the first race, we had Pato O'Ward dominating almost as much as you can dominate these sorts of races. Really very controlled win, ending a little bit of a dry spell for him. But of course, it's too late for the championship for him. Like, way too late. This ship has sailed quite a few rounds ago. Instead, the big championship story was still on Alex Palou, Mr. Consistent in the first race yet again. We know Chip Ganassi doesn't bring the best package to the ovals, and still the guy just manages to find his way into the top 5 race after race in classic Palou fashion, like almost invisible but just always there. I don't know, just hugely impressive to watch in terms of stringing together entire championships. I think he might be one of the most impressive racing drivers, not just in IndyCar but in the world at this stage. Like, really stunning. Unfortunately, he had crucial mechanical failure going into the formation lap of the second race, which essentially meant he was going to lose a huge amount of points. Would have given Will Power the chance to take the lead in the championship even. We know how competitive Penske is, and he was right at the front. And then Power made a bit of an uncharacteristic error by spinning himself on one of the restarts, and somehow he still finished top 10. So a very chaotic race. The second race in particular was carnage, but either way, this now leaves us with a very close championship going into the last round. And I have to say, I just mentioned Palou, one of the best drivers over the course of a season. In an individual race, this could go either way, and in some ways, with recent form, I might even give Power an advantage going into that race if he can actually finish it. So either way, it'll be straight fire to watch, no doubt about it. I do want to highlight a different driver this time out, and here, yes, he may not be the most well-liked character on the grid, and for good reason, but Santino Ferrucci did an absolutely impressive job this time out, scoring 2 top 4 finishes for AJ Foyt, rather unheard of. And I do have to think, even if, you know, you have a good reason not to like the guy, I have to say watching him race is one of the most entertaining drivers you can watch at the moment. It's the amount of aggression, but like a very measured aggression, to the point where he doesn't really overdo it, at least not often, which is just incredibly entertaining and exciting to watch. Like wherever he is, you can be sure there will be action to watch on track. And I, for one, think that is a very good thing, and we should just strictly separate driver from personality in that sense. One last shout out to Connor Daly for doing what Roman Grosjean couldn't do so far, scoring a podium for JHR in a very, very impressive first race of the weekend as well. Now, that was a lot for the week. As always, let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments, and otherwise I hope to catch you in the next one.